There'll be a lot of birds here by then.
Jenny, are you ready? Okay, we're going to get started. You want to start on time. Welcome. My name is Marian Chubon, and I am the president of Represent the AZ All Volunteer. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much. I'm not going to talk long because you didn't come to see me. You came to hear from the candidates. But since we have you here, I'm going to share a few things about our organization with you. So we are a all-volunteer grassroots super PAC, the only one in Arizona. We are really excited. We started out as a group of concerned citizens who showed up outside of Martha McSally's office on November 21st, 2016. Almost a year. It's been almost a year. We're going to have a party, too. We're going to have an anniversary party. And we showed up there. What we wanted was we wanted to implore the Congresswoman to take a stand against hate. That was our specific message that day. There were Nazis in the White House. And Martha seemed to be okay with that, from what we could tell. We met with our staff 5 times, our organization. We used to be called McSally Take a Stand. We tried to convince her to engage more openly with her constituents. You can Google the story about how we held a town hall and she held one at the same time. Some of you were at our town hall, some of you were speakers at our town hall. But I'm not going to go into that whole story. You can look it up. Fast forward to May 2nd. Martha voted to take health care away from 6% of her constituents. And she did it with such glee, chanting, "Let's get this effing thing done." Despite all stakeholders in her district pleading with her not to vote for that bill because it was a disaster. That day we knew she was not committed to representing her constituents, but rather her dark money donors, like the NRA and the Congressional Leadership Fund, which just opened a district office in Tucson. That is Paul Ryan's dark money fund, in case you don't know about it. They are committed to get her elected, their words, and they are canvassing in our community door to door. We registered as a super PAC the day she voted for the AHCA. Thank you. And we filed one time with the FEC. You can look us up. It's pretty exciting. $5,000, something like that. We're not in the big money game. The more we researched, the more we found that Martha says one thing and does another. Some of you already knew that. Some of us are pretty new to this game, and we had no idea. If she was honest about her votes, we would just work with groups like Indivisible Southern Arizona to protest her votes or to try to get her to change her positions. But she doesn't. She doesn't tell the truth. So as our lead researcher, Teresa Zimmerman, is she here? Oh, she's here. Teresa says, it isn't always what she says, it's usually what she leaves out. So we decided to work to bring representation back to the people, not the dark moneyed interests. We may not all agree on the issues, but we can agree that the people are not being heard. So this is our organization. In order to bring true representation to District 2, we identified 3 main strategies. So first, policy education. Educating the voters via thorough research. Our website includes many of the issues she has stated positions on. So if you go to our website, you can click on the issues at the top, and a drop-down will show all the issues we've written about. Okay, our second leg of our mission is candidate awareness, and that's why we're all here tonight. So our website has bios of all the candidates that you're going to hear from tonight. Additionally, they answered a very extensive questionnaire. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, we were not kind. We were very thorough in the questionnaire, the questions that we asked them. And you can find it at the bottom of each of the candidate pages where the Q&A is. And then our third leg is voter engagement. So we're not going to flip this seat without registering voters, getting out the vote, and fighting voter suppression. We have partnered with 2 groups, Arizona Ground Game and Lucha, which is Living United for Change. And these groups have tables in the lobby, and they're working on this piece of our mission. So we, as Represent Me AZ, will be having more candidate engagement such as this one in the coming year. Additionally, we'll be doing more creative engagements such as live Facebook question and answer with the candidates. Be sure to like our Facebook page, Represent Me AZ. It's up there. Also follow us on Twitter. We're pretty active on there. We would love lots of retweets. We're Represent Me AZ on Twitter. And on our website, please sign up for our email newsletter where we will update you on issues, candidate fundraising, bills that have been voted on, and upcoming events. Our committees meet every second Tuesday at St. Mark's Presbyterian Church at 6:30, and you can go to our website for more information. It's also on our Facebook page. Lastly, we're a grassroots super PAC, and we cannot survive without donations from folks like you. Please donate on our website, or feel free to make a donation at the table out front. We have card swipers, and we also take cash and checks. Our website will always show where the money comes from and what we are spending it on. We're dedicated to transparency for ourselves as well. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator tonight. Tucson Weekly Executive Editor Jim Ninsel covered politics for the Tucson Weekly for more than 2 decades. He's been a commenter with PBS affiliates in Tucson and Phoenix and has been named a Journalist of the Year by the Arizona Press Club and the Arizona Newspaper Association on numerous occasions. Please welcome Jim Ninsel.
Thank you, Marion, and thank all of you for coming out here tonight. I know some of you have come far distances to be here this evening, and it's very early in the season, so that's terrific that there's so much interest in what's happening in this congressional district so early on. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my alma mater. For those of you who do not know, I am a Rincon High graduate. I always imagined if I'd be on the stage, I'd be shredding guitar with my band behind me. This is going to have to do. Rangers! So, without further ado, let's get the show on the road. Bring out our candidates. In alphabetical order, we have former state lawmaker Matt Hines. Former Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick. Hotel Congress manager and entrepreneur Billy Kovacs. Former Assistant Secretary of the Army, Mary Mattia. And last but not least, former state lawmaker, Bruce Wheeler. All right. We're going to start out today with a lightning round, just get where these candidates stand on a variety of issues. So we're just going to ask them to raise their hands if they support these issues, just to get them out of the way right off the bat. Number one, do you support a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers? All right. Right there. Do you oppose the Rosemont mine proposal in the Santa Rita Mountains? Do you support allowing low-income women on Medicaid to continue to use Planned Parenthood as their health care provider if they choose to do so? Do you support restoring funding for the CSAs and the Affordable Care Act that President Trump recently halted? Do you support extending background checks on gun sales to secondhand sales that don't involve a federally licensed firearms dealer? And our last lightning round question. Do you support changing the Antiquities Act or reducing the boundaries of current national monuments? And that's a big round of no's. All right. Now, each candidate here, I believe, is answering 5 questions. Is that correct, Mary? Opening statements. Oh, yes. You all get to have an opening statement. Excuse me. All right. So we'll start right down the line here. Bruce, would you like to start with an opening statement?
Good evening. I'm Bruce Wheeler. I am running because I believe our nation is facing its greatest internal threat in generations, led by a president and his enablers in Congress, including Martha McSally. You and your children are directly impacted. I've been an advocate and neighbor in this district for over 20 years. As a city council member, cleaning up groundwater contamination, facilitating innovative and clean business development to create good-paying jobs, and making government accountable to its taxpayers. As a legislative leader elected by you within this district for 3 consecutive terms, I played a key role in expanding Medicaid, fighting for public education, and always consistently advocating for the universal rights of women, workers, minorities, families, and our most vulnerable residents. I am grateful for your trust and support over the years. There is critical work to be done, and I have the experience and qualifications required. I would be proud to represent you and the good people of Southern Arizona in Congress. Thank you.
Oh, Ann, please.
Everything that I care about, my values and principles, are on the chopping block right now. For example, addressing climate change, protecting the environment, creating good-paying 21st century jobs, passing immigration reform instead of tearing families apart, and protecting people's right to have health care. My daughter is sitting here, and last November after the election gave birth to my second grandson a month early. And he spent almost 2 weeks in the newborn ICU. And my daughter said, I never expected this to happen. And I said, that's the point. That's why we have to protect health care. My proudest vote was for the ACA. We don't want to repeal it. Martha McSally voted to take health care away from 24 million people. She is not serving Tucson and Southern Arizona, and that's why I'm running. Thank you so much.
Matt, you're up.
All right, thanks, Jim. Hey, thank you all for being here. It's early. This is the second forum we've done together, all 5 of us, and we're all among friends. So we're all on the same side here. We have got to get rid of Martha McSally. So I just want to thank you all for being here. And look, something that Martha has forgotten is that we are her employers, right? And we are here asking you for a job. This is a job interview, one of many, probably. And that is something that I think the entire Congress really needs to be reminded about, and our executive branch as well. President Trump actually works for us. I'm not sure if he really understands that. Our senators work for us, and sometimes they don't act like they understand it. So, thank you for being here, for participating in this process. I look forward to this discussion and many more to come.
And Mary, you're up next.
Hello, and thank you for being here. I am running because I want to make sure that your voice, your values are heard in Washington, D.C. The current representative does not voice your values. She is not paying attention. What do you want? What I hear is you want equality. You want opportunity. You want security. You want a safe planet. But these are not the things that are being represented in Washington, D.C. Those are my values. I promise you that I will fight for Medicare for all. I promise you that I will fight for equal opportunity in education. And I promise you that I will fight for veterans' rights and security. And to make sure that our planet is taken care of. That environment is not going to have bad water and bad air. So I am fighting for you, and your voice will be heard in Washington, D.C.
Finally, Billy, you're up.
Good evening. Oh, did I get the mic that doesn't work? Thanks, Jim. Okay. Good evening. My name is Billy Kovacs, and I'm running for Congress because I have a new vision of what I think this district should be. This district is not a Republican or Democratic district. It's a district with, I think, a clear vision for the future, and I want to bring that vision and that new generation of leadership into what Southern Arizona is. That's good, high-paying, affordable jobs, not just for STEM and high-quality jobs that are in a certain part of our economy, but for blue-collar workers and workers in Cochise County, in Douglas, in Benson, in Bisbee, and make sure that we have an educational system that supports that. And we don't do that as a state. And I think every single one of us woke up after the election in 2016 and felt a gut check. And that gut check is our ability to make sure that we can change the future, and I want to do that now. And I think that this time is where we galvanize our support as progressives and Democrats, and we push what I think is a vision for Southern Arizona that bleeds that partisan line. Thank you.
So Representative AZ did do a call for questions online, and boy, did you guys respond. There were a lot of questions. We're not going to get through them all tonight, but we picked a sample of them. Don't worry, we got a whole year to work this all out, so the questions will be answered, one assumes, over the course of this campaign. But we're going to start with a healthcare question, and just to explain what we're doing here, not everybody has to answer every question. The candidates have cards they can hold up if it's a question they want to answer so that we can move through more questions. So we're going to start with healthcare, and the first question on healthcare is, what specific changes would you push to improve the Affordable Care Act? All right, a bunch of hands up there, and why don't we start with you since we started with Bruce earlier.
I voted for the Affordable Care Act, and it's my most proud vote because it's saving lives, and I hear people's stories all the time. Martha McSally voted to take away health care for 24 million people, 40,000 people in this district. She doesn't care. What we need to do is work together to make it better. It's not perfect. And one of the things we have to do is lower prescription drug costs. So I have a health care working group here in Tucson, and we've come together. It's a very broad spectrum, people from all different sectors in healthcare, and there's a consensus that we need to start putting money into prevention, and that's how we lower the cost and make the system better. That's not being done right now. So that's my idea. I'm open to your ideas. I really, really appreciate everybody being here tonight, and I think that we ought to allow people to buy into Medicare. You know, we have counties where we only have one insurance carrier, and if people could buy into Medicare at any age, that would give them an additional choice.
your hand up, anyone else's hand up on this one? Billy, let's hear from you.
Is my mic on now? That's all right. I think that we need to make sure that, I stand with Dan on this, that we need to have a public option. We need to make a pathway. Thanks, Mary. I could just yell, but it's fine. I think that we need to make sure that we focus on things. I think we need to focus on things like cross-state competitiveness within our insurance marketplaces. I stand with you as well on making sure that drug prescription prices are lower. If I can go to Mexico or Canada and get prescription drugs that are more accessible and lower rate than I can in our own country, that's a problem. We need to make sure that we get corporate, big business out of our prescriptions and out of our pockets and make sure that we build a pathway through a public option to what I think is going to be the fight of the next 10 years, and that is the pathway to Medicare for all.
Thank you. I'm a strong supporter of Medicare for all. On the floor of the House of Representatives in Arizona last year, I was the first legislator on the floor to call for what at the time was considered a very risky statement and declaration, that I stood for Medicare for all Americans, not only those of us who are 65 years and older. You know, each and every single one of us knows someone, a friend, a family member that's on Medicare. It works, it's efficient, it's cost effective, and already it is covering the single most expensive segment of our population, those of us 65 and older. So by including healthy families in everyone and making it universal, we strengthen the program and make it viable into the future. You know, a couple of months ago, one of the leaders of the Democratic Party stood up and introduced a bold new plan. And a moment when we needed bold new ideas and plans and to step forward and distinguish ourselves, Democrats, from them, Republicans, at a moment of the most consequential discussion on health care in Congress, where we saw Republicans floundering and not be able to do anything at all about replacing or repealing, we failed to stand up and say, this is what the Democratic Party stands for. They are failing. They've been lying to you for 7 years. And now we want Medicare for all because it works, because it's efficient, it's universal, and how can we say no to a family who has a newborn child with a health disease, illness, that they will go bankrupt for not being able to take care of it. Medicare for all is something we ought to boldly stand for.
All right, I want to shift over to gun violence. The question is, as we all know, the Abbey Giffords District, we're all very familiar with what happens with gun violence, the impacts of it. Do you support requiring gun owners to register their firearms with the federal government? Anyone want to tackle that one? Billy.
I'm always first over here without my American American.
Like Jeopardy.
I think we need to shift the whole system into thinking about gun violence, not about every single mass shooting. And this community has been affected by one of the worst mass shootings in our nation's history. But we need to start talking about domestic violence and how many gun deaths are attributed to domestic violence every single year. Because if I can register a car, and the federal government has been putting in regulations for the last 30, 40 years of cars, providing airbags, of seat belts, of safety measures, of getting registered. We need to have the same thing to buy a firearm. And that's what we really should be talking about. So absolutely, I think there should be a federal system to where it works across states, so we don't have one state filing information about someone that's a domestic violence perpetrator in another state, and so that when that person crosses state lines, that we know exactly what they've done in another area of this country, and we can make sure that their pathway to getting a gun is cut off.
All right, anyone else on this one?
I do believe that responsible gun ownership is going to require federal legislation. You can't go from one state to another and have different policies. It won't work that way. So we do need federal guidelines. We need federal guidelines that define what responsible gun ownership is. And that is, we need federal guidelines that will require background checks. We need federal guidelines that will make sure that we get assault rifles out of the hands of criminals. We need federal guidelines that make sure that there are requirements for, in case someone has been a domestic abuser, that those guns are taken away from him. We need federal guidelines for her. We need federal guidelines that say that we cannot ensure the safety of anyone unless all states cooperate with making sure that there are assault rifles that are no longer available to anybody. And so I think there's just too many people who have been killed, you know, and Billy mentioned Columbine, he mentioned Orlando, he mentioned Las Vegas. No, these things could have been prevented if we had done more criminal background checks, definitely stop the loopholes in gun shows and not being able to buy guns in gun shows. Thank you.
I think Bruce had his up, and then we'll go to Matt.
You know, what's been occurring in this country is nothing short of insanity and a national disgrace. When we think of the children, the 6 and 7-year-olds at Sandy Hook, and all the other multiple Americans and foreigners who have been subject and killed by these mass shootings, and we have done absolutely nothing, that is a national disgrace. This insanity has to come to an end. What I would do in Congress, I would take 3 immediate concrete steps for which there used to be considerable bipartisan support, and I think we ought to revive this with a new Congress in 2018. 1, background checks. Even Wayne LaPierre, the executive director of the NRA, several years ago, watched the video. He declared at that time that he supported background checks. Now they will destroy any politician, or attempt to destroy any politician, who dares to speak out against background checks. Bump stocks. We take a semi-automatic, we add a $99 device, and we have an automatic weapon. That has to come to an end. Now, we heard some big talk from some Republicans a couple weeks ago that they might consider that, and nothing has happened. Again, another failure. And then, you know, it's just, the words just don't come to my mind when we try to describe what's happening. And again, nothing has been done. That's inexcusable.
Matt, I think you wanted to weigh in on this one.
That's right. So, you know, the problem is we're not going to be able to stop every rogue incident, every rogue unstable shooter, like Jared Loeffner's, like this gentleman in Las Vegas. So while we can certainly discuss federal registration, we can look at the universal background check, which I of course support, that will not necessarily stop these things from happening. But what absolutely can decrease the amount of harm and the amount of lives lost would be limiting the availability of these weapons of war. And by that I mean the AR-15s and assault-style weapons that you can go into Walmart right now and buy 5 of. So that is reducing the number of those types of weapons that are around, and also enforcing some reasonable limitations on high-capacity magazines. If it's good enough for our federal agents and for the chief of police, why is that good enough for you and me, right? So I don't think you need to have more than 10 bullets in a magazine. And just think, if Jared Loeffner fired 31 bullets, remember that. 20 more than he would have been able to fire if there had been a reasonable limitation on that magazine he had in that clock, right? So 20 fewer bullets fired. Would Christina Taylor Greene be applying for college right now? I don't know. But I don't think we should have to ask these questions anymore. Thank you.
All right. Marion was good enough to let me know we're only supposed to have 3 of you answer each question. So we've jumped the gun on this one for sure, so to speak. Question on the environment. You know, often there are trade-offs between economic development issues and environmental issues. That would include limits on the production of greenhouse gases or conflicts between the mining industry and the environmental community. How do you see yourself balancing those concerns? All right, let's see, we got Ann, Billy. Okay, Ann and Billy. Ann, why don't you start?
Let me just say about the previous question, I support Gabby Gifford's common sense legislation that would strengthen background checks, close gun sale loopholes, and put money into the mental health system. And Gabby has endorsed me in this campaign. Regarding the environment, I believe that we can balance protecting the environment and also protecting jobs. But let me ask a question, show of hands. Why in the world do we continue to give oil subsidies to the big oil companies when they are making record profits? I believe that we have to have a national energy strategy that puts money into alternative energy. Arizona should be a leader in solar and in alternative energy, right? Right here in Tucson. That's what we need to do. And stop the big oil subsidies. It doesn't make sense anymore. And it's not helping the environment, it's harming the environment. Now, I know somebody just said, what about Oak Flats? Let me talk about that. That was a Republican bill introduced by Paul Gosar and John McCain. When I heard that, I wanted to be at the table so that I could be involved in protecting the Apache Leap sacred site, and it is in permanent protection, and also making sure that the community was heard. Now, I want to just tell you a little bit about what their concern was. People live in that community, and they value their environment. And I made sure that all environmental compliance laws were in that legislation, and we're going to be involved in that process because the people who live in that community, they want the copper mine, but they want a clean environment. Thank you.
What about your vote on the Clean Air Act?
Who else had a card up for this? Billy and then Bruce.
I feel like I have a permanent card up. And I only get 5 of these.
You're going to run out here pretty quick here, Billy.
Can I borrow someone's?
I'm with you.
That'd be nice. Climate change is real. We look at it every day. Our monsoon seasons are getting shorter. If we look at the world stage, we don't have enough food to maintain the population increase globally that's going on right now. And in our own district, we need to make sure, that, like Ann said, is that we are the solar capital of the world. It shouldn't be Germany. It shouldn't be other countries paving the way for solar energy and clean jobs. We need to make sure that we can transition the jobs of the past into the jobs of the future so that we don't leave the middle class income workers that have been the backbone of our economy for generations behind. We need to make sure that we have educational funding for vocational programs so that we can give them a job in the new industries of tomorrow by also putting food on their table and making sure that we are competitive as a nation as we go into this global war on climate change. And I think that we need to be a leader in the US, not 5th or 6th or 29th in the world. We need to make sure that solar energy and clean water are the 2 things that we focus on in our state and in this district. And if we don't start talking about our water resources or the super sites or making sure that companies like Rosemont Copper don't put 15,000 temporary jobs and cut down an ecological system in our backyard and make sure that going on in the future that we have clean and sustainable copper recycling plants in this district that make sure that we have jobs that we can be proud of and that we can answer to in 2 years when one of us gets elected. So thank you.
Yeah, Billy. I think Bruce wanted to weigh in on this one too.
As recently as this morning, Martha McSally voted for the tax bill. That tax bill included something called allowing drilling and pipe installations in the Arctic National Wild Refuge. That was part of the budget. Now, how that got in there? Well, the same way that this guy Pruitt is heading the EPA. The same way that other people from the industry that were being regulated are now in positions of EPA, clean water, clean air, trying to protect us. These are the people, this is the wolf guarding the hen house. And this is what Donald Trump has done, and that is what Martha McSally voted on today, this morning. By the way, it only passed by about 6 votes, and not every Republican voted for it. 20 Republicans in the House voted against it, but not Martha McSally. Donald Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords. Now, the only good news here is that it takes 4 years for that administratively to become a fact. So if one of us is elected to the House, and if we take over the House next year, then we will put a brake on that path that we are headed. Global warming is an existential issue. It is a ticking time bomb. Every year, every 2 years, and every 4 years that we do nothing or go backwards is robbing our future generations of a healthy planet.
That brings us to our next question on the environment, which is, what steps do you think the United States should take to combat climate change? All right. Let's start with Mary on this one. Yeah.
Okay, the steps we have to take is, first of all, we have to encourage people to use renewable energy. We have to increase the use of solar. We have to increase the use of wind energy. We have to definitely punish or put penalties on the continued use of fossil fuels. The main problem for the greenhouse effect is fossil fuels. So we have to have legislation here in the United States to address that. Now, that's going to be a very unpopular thing to do because that is this big industry with a lot of lobbyists. But we have to be strong enough to fight lobbyists, and we have to be strong enough to know what's good for our planet. So we have to definitely give tax credits to the solar energy, to people who are able to build electric cars, and definitely penalize those industries that are emitting fossil fuels into the air. That is the main culprit for the greenhouse effect. So a lot of federal legislation, very, very aggressive federal legislation needs to be addressed, and hopefully we will get to the point by 2050, because we have to put a deadline on this. By 2050, I am hoping that we will have legislation out there to reduce the use of fossil fuels or gasoline in our cars and go to electric cars. Thank you.
All right. You all set your hands up. I think it's Matt and Ann. Okay, Matt, how about you go?
Great, thanks, Jim. So, and you've heard some of this already, but one of the most important ways we can really make jobs and industry and economic issues dovetail with the greening of our economy and those kinds of jobs is really to do a lot of things that make a ton of sense for our carbon footprints. And one of those things is, for example, to refurbish our electrical grid. I know that doesn't sound very interesting, but there's tons of our electrical energy that just bleeds out into the environment, dirt, poles, wherever, and it creates all sorts of jobs, and it saves so much energy. That's one of the greenest things we can absolutely do. And other jobs like that, whether it's wind turbines to be able to harness wind energy, or focusing on additional solar, like Abby Giffords so famously did throughout her career in Congress, that is where I will certainly be putting a lot of my own energy, because that is something that we can uniquely do here in Arizona, especially in southern Arizona, given the number of days of sun that we have here. And I agree with Billy, we should not let Germany do better than the United States, and certainly better than Arizona in terms of per capita alternative energy production. And frankly, New Jersey shouldn't be besting us either, and they are. So we really have a lot of work to do, and I'm going to make sure that it happens.
Okay, Ann, you had your hand up? All right.
We really need to have a national energy strategy and do everything possible to reduce carbon emissions. I've been to Western Africa and these island countries on the west coast of Africa where people are afraid they're going to lose their country because of the rising ocean. And I believe in science. You believe in science. This is real, folks. We have to stop the subsidies to big oil. We need to direct that money into alternative energy research. We need to encourage solar energy production and make it affordable. We need to encourage wind power. We need to encourage the electric car, battery cars. California voluntarily on their own was able to reduce their carbon footprint by 50%. It can be done, folks, and we should be doing it. I really think it's important that Arizona take the lead and that we have leadership in Arizona that will address this, because we can do it. We can make it happen. We should be producing solar panels here in Arizona. We should be taking the lead and making sure that they're affordable and people can put them on their homes. And we can together, come together and really make a big difference. It's never been more important than it is right now. And Bruce, I agree with you so much that we are robbing the future of our children. So we've got to get this done, folks. Have to.
All right, I want to shift to a question on taxes. Actually, I want to do a lightning round question, because I suspect I know the answer to this one. Would you raise your hand if you support the Republican tax proposal? All right, figured that one out. How about this one? Lift up your card. Do you support the repeal of the estate tax? You want to answer that one? Anybody? The estate tax. The estate tax. The so-called death tax. Inheritance tax. Yes, Bruce.
I do not support the repeal of the estate tax. This is a regressive move that only benefits a very tiny portion of the very wealthiest Americans. And it was, I believe, Theodore Roosevelt, the Republican president, who wouldn't be a Republican today, obviously, who understood the necessity of having something like the estate tax because of the concentration of extreme amounts of private wealth in the hands of the 1% or even less than 1%. And so I think it's another step backward, and we need to put an end to that, and hopefully a new Congress next year, by 2019, will reverse the trajectory we're headed on.
Billy threw up a card at the last minute here.
Oh, wait, is this taking a card? I thought this was still lightning round.
Yeah.
I only have 2 left, so.
No.
Oh, no, never mind.
You want to do it as a lightning round? Does anybody here support the repeal of the estate tax? Okay, we got to the bottom of that one. All right, so let's shift over to the border. What are your thoughts on a border wall? And if you do not support it, how would you secure the border? All right, bunch of hands up here. Let's start with Ann on this one.
Yeah, I served on the Homeland Security Committee and have been to the border, and we do not want a wall, right? No wall. No wall. I'm a former prosecutor, and look, I have zero tolerance for criminal activity. But what we need to do is pass comprehensive immigration reform that includes the DREAM Act. So then our Border Patrol agents can focus on the people who are criminals and in the criminal activity across the border. But folks, right now, we're tearing families apart. It's tragic what's happening because we haven't passed comprehensive immigration reform. And here, 30% of our economy comes from Mexico. We do not want a wall, right? We stand together on that. We do not want a wall. It doesn't make sense, and it can't be done. The border is way too rugged to build a wall all across the border. It just doesn't make sense. But after we pass comprehensive immigration reform, Border Patrol can invest in technology that will help them spot the criminal activity, stop the criminal activity coming across the border. And I think it's never been more important now than ever that we pass the DREAM Act and protect DACA. So you know these young people who just want a good education so they too can have a stake at the American dream. Folks, that's the kind of compassionate people we are in this country and in Arizona and in Tucson. Thanks so much.
The border wall is a really stupid idea. I've been saying it all along, and will continue to say it, that it's a stupid idea. First of all, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. What does work is good border security. You have to hire more customs agents. They will keep bad criminals from coming through. Okay? However, I remember the day when I used to go back and forth. My husband was born in Nogales, Sonora. His relatives used to come back and forth from Nogales and Hermosillo, Magdalena, whatever, into the United States. They weren't criminals. They weren't rapists. I really resent the fact that President Trump represented us as criminal and rapists. That is wrong. People who have come from Mexico have come and they've contributed to this country. They have contributed to this country. So I have talked to representatives at Tohono O'odham. They don't want the border wall. They do not want it. But we all do want some amount of security there. However, we've got to do it in a way where it's more, like I said, it's either at the border or you can have, some drones checking to see who's coming across, but you don't need the wall. Also, environmentalists are very much against the wall. They say that destroys the habitat, that destroys our water flow, that destroys our animals coming across, and it is totally unnecessary. It's wrong socially, it's wrong environmentally. Thank you.
Stand up on this one, Bruce.
Okay. I don't know why, but I keep answering all the questions, and I have one card left, so darn it. I look at the immigration conversation, and yeah, it's comprehensive because it deals with so many issues in our community. I think the biggest and most important thing, along with the DREAM Act, is making sure that every single undocumented person in this country that is contributing to our economy, all 11.2 million of them, have a pathway to citizenship that come into our country and make sure that they have the same opportunity that we had. We are Hungarian immigrants that came after World War II, and we fought oppression from the Nazis and from the Russians in 1956. We have a vineyard named after my great-grandfather, who is a Hungarian freedom fighter, 35 miles away from the border. And if we don't understand the opportunities that we had in our own generations, that we have a pathway to give those to others. And I think that is the number one thing we need to start talking about immigration. The other one is, I don't think that we need to increase the amount of border agents. We already show that there's a decrease from the Obama administration of the amount of traffic coming over the borders. What we need to do is increase the amount of trade and commerce that comes from our number one trading partner, and that's Mexico. I think we should. The third one is making sure that those communities and the border checkpoint or the border region in the district that we're trying to represent encompasses Agua Prieta. And the fact that is a over 1,000-year community, cross-border community, we need to make sure that families are allowed to go back and forth over the border and make sure that we keep those families safe.
Billy said the number one thing we need to talk about is undocumented people in this country now and their fate. So let's ask about that next. Do you support the path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants now in this country who can pass background checks, pay back taxes, and a fine. It's similar to what was in the so-called Gang of Eight legislation that passed the Senate but did not come to a vote in the House. And we had a bunch of hands going up on this one. Let's start with you, Bruce.
Yes.
Yes. Would you care to elaborate?
I was raised by 3 people. My mother, Elvira Recio Echeverria, Elvia Nunez, and my father, Russell Benson Wheeler. Till the day that my mother died, I spoke Spanish to her, and only Spanish. And to the day that my father died, only English. So our living room and our dining room was one in which it was a back and forth, fluent Spanish and English amongst my brothers and my parents. Elvia never had the opportunity to come to this country, but some of my other relatives from Colombia have. And I won't go any further there, but I will tell you this. I do not have a birth certificate. So I challenge Martha McSally or any of these xenophobia members of the Republican caucus in Congress to make that an issue. You know, there should be no wall. The wall is a boondoggle, dumb idea, a waste of money. It impedes the freedom and flow of ideas, the freedom and flow of academia, of jobs, of intelligent people coming and filling jobs, and people without skills coming and filling other jobs. When Trump and Ryan both said that they favored a 20% tariff or an import tax, depending on who was talking, interestingly, we had Governor Ducey say, "Are you crazy?" He didn't say, "Are you crazy?" but basically said, "Are you crazy? Mexico is our greatest trading partner, our biggest trading partner. How could you possibly advocate something like that?" And my time is up, or I would continue. Thank you.
Bruce, you should go to Hawaii. I understand they'll give birth certificates to anybody.
I don't need no stinking birth certificate.
All right, who else is up for the path to citizenship for undocumented folks? Anybody? Back.
Thank you. I think we need to approach immigration and specifically pathway to citizenship for those who are here, who are contributing, who are abiding by the laws. We have to approach this from a position of fairness and compassion and common sense. These folks are not going to be rounded up in truck. I don't know, Arpaio is out of work now, so maybe he'll be willing to do something like that. But no, so we're not going to be running around and picking these folks up and trying to deport them en masse. That's a ridiculous notion that I think a lot of folks on the other side of the aisle, for some reason, think is valid. Or they know it's not going to work and they say it to people to get them to vote for them, which is even worse. So we need to be fair about it. We need to exercise common sense, and we need to make sure that folks, again, get into line and get their green cards, get legal, and we have to also not forget about the border economy. That is extremely important. You've heard it. You've heard a lot of us talk about it up here, and we have a bottleneck at the border. So many jobs come from the border, and we have a bottleneck at the border in terms of produce and goods moving back and forth across the border, and the way to fix that is not Border Patrol agents, but customs and immigration officials that can help make that flow of produce and products and commerce better and help us to actually increase the number of jobs that we have as a direct relation with our relationship in terms of Sonora, which is our largest trading partner. So we can't forget that part of the immigration discussion beyond just making sure that people here have their pathway to citizenship.
No? All right. I got to ask my timekeepers here. We're going to shift to a different mode where the candidates are going to ask each other questions, but how much time do we have left? We have time for... Sure. One more question. On the military and Southern Arizona, besides supporting the aging 810 fleet, what do you propose to do to keep Davis-Monthan Air Force Base viable and off the chopping block when it comes to base closures? Oh boy, everybody wants a piece of this action. Can we do 4 this one? All right, we're going to bend the rules and do 4. Bruce, let's start with you.
The A-10 is an obsolete airplane with new wings and new avionics fulfilling a single purpose, close air support mission. It only has one single purpose. And in the new military, what Chief of Staff General David Feinstein says is we need aircraft that can perform multiple purposes. So the A-10 is perfect for close air support. But becoming obsolete, they built and created this monstrosity called the F-35 that's supposed to be a multi-purpose aircraft. In other words, it's air superiority airplane that can go air to air, it can go air to ground, it can fly supposedly between valleys in places like Afghanistan and support troops. Problem is, it is the single most expensive weapon system ever devised by humanity. $1.1 trillion and up. It is still going up. And you know what? It still is not combat ready. It's 6 years late. It doesn't perform its mission. It's robbing money, as President Eisenhower said in his farewell address, from schools, hospitals, and jobs. This thing does not work. But what we ought to be doing in southern Arizona and across the country is focusing on the future mission of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. What mission will this critical base to our economy, to the livelihood of so many Arizonans hold and perform? We look at new missions, we look at new aircraft, hopefully more cost-effective than the F-35, hopefully more efficient than the F-35, and hopefully one that can compete with the Sukhoi F-35 itself. So that's my statement. Thank you.
All right.
I want to just mention one more thing about comprehensive immigration reform before I answer this question. I introduced legislation that will allow dreamers to work on Capitol Hill because I'm convinced that if Congress could hear their stories, we could do this and pass comprehensive immigration reform. Now, I support the A-10, but let me tell you who saved the A-10. Not Martha McSally, Ron Barber. I was a co-sponsor of Ron Barber's amendment when we were doing the Defense Reauthorization Bill. He saved the A-10. She takes credit for it, but she didn't do it, so just remember that, folks. But we need to modernize Davis-Monthan and our military. We put too much money into military systems and not enough into our personnel. Now, probably a lot of you know people who work at Davis-Monthan and can barely feed their families. We don't pay them well enough. We don't take care of them when they come back from war. You know, I served on the Veteran Services Committee, and I know we've got a lot of veterans here tonight, and I thank you for your service. Some of you I met and talked with. We don't do right by our veterans. We have a great facility here in Tucson, but we still make it difficult. So we've got a lot of work to do when it comes to the military, but you know, technology, modernizing the military is the direction to go in. Fort Huachuca is a cyber command center, an international cyber command center. That's where the future of the military lies, and we've got to protect the jobs we have at our military bases here in Arizona.
All right.
I have a very, very long history with Davis-Monthan. I first worked at Davis-Monthan when I was 16 years old. It was my after-school job when I went to Pueblo High School. I also met my husband at Davis-Monthan, and I became a military wife and an Air Force wife. But so Davis-Monthan has a very, very close place in my heart, and I will do everything I can to protect it and to make sure it is not in any way, shape, or form decreased in mission. But it's had very many different missions. When I first worked there, I worked at the U-2 hangar. And then when I was in college, I had a very close friend who had F-4 training there. And then now the A-10 comes in. I do want to put in a different perspective to the A-10. I was working at the Pentagon. Assistant Secretary of the Army, when we heard that the Air Force wanted to mothball the A-10 because it's old. The Army loves the A-10. The Marines love the A-10. The A-10 is close air support. The mission requires the A-10. So to say we don't need the A-10, well, that's, very theoretical on your part. But the person who's on the ground fighting for their lives and yours is saying they want the A-10 because it's doing good for them. So we have to consider that. What is the mission and who's benefiting from the mission? There are other things that Davis Mountain can do. It will evolve. One of the things it can do, it could get more, the boneyard can get bigger. We can do drone support, intelligence support. But let's say right now that the mission, the guys on the ground saving your lives, they want the A-10. Thank you.
Thank you. And Billy, I think you wanted to address this one as well.
It's the last question, so yeah.
Why not? Throw it.
I'm glad I sparsed out my card so I can answer all the questions. I agree with Mary. I think that the A-10 is vital for close air combat because of the speeds in which it can fly through areas in close combat. There's personal stories on that, but I stand with you in saying that. But in that whole discussion about DM, we have to look at the bigger picture of Arizona. We have to look at the Goldwater Range and that asset that we have in our backyard. We have to look at the fighter pilots that are training at Luke Air Force Base, our intelligence personnel, and understanding that the war of the future is going to be a war of cyber warfare that's not going to be on the ground anymore. And we need to make sure that we provide funding to make sure that, that we come to the forefront of that issue. When we look at BRAC or base closure, I came from a community when I was younger that we had that in the Clinton administration. We need to make sure that we don't cut the vital spending to our defense industry, but we need to fight the overspending and how much money is lost by subcontractors in Southern Arizona and globally. There is more money that is given to subcontractors at higher wages than our personnel that actually are trained from our military, and they are doing jobs that they don't want to do. And we need to make sure that we bring them back and that our soldiers are paid a fair and living wage. And that it's in every branch of the military. And that is one of the biggest issues. When I go and talk to advocates for the base, or I sit on Southern Arizona Leadership and Arizona Technology Council as ambassador for both of those organizations, you talk to those soldiers, they want their jobs back, and they don't want a contractor that's making $80,000 a year to do the same jobs that they can. Not saying that we need to not support some of our communications subcontractors in Sierra Vista, but we need to make sure that those jobs are there for the future. Thank you.
All right. So now we're going to mix it up a little bit. Let the candidates ask each other one question. They get to pick another candidate to pick on with their question. Wow. And we'll do this in reverse alphabetical order. So let's start with Bruce Wheeler. You have a question for another candidate?
Sure, can I change the rules around a little bit? I do have a question and I'll ask for hands. So Martha McSally, the impression is that she can really sing well. Which one of you thinks you can sing better than she
I'm tempted to ask.
I have the voice of an angel.
For a little bit. A little demonstration, but I'm going to pass on that one. All right, so next up in our reverse alphabetical order, if I have this correctly, would be Mary Mathieu.
My question is to Anchor Patrick, and I'm just curious on why you voted to prevent the implementation of the Clean Power Plan.
Good question, dear. I believe that we have to balance protecting the environment with keeping jobs. And I really believe that we can convert our coal-fired plants into clean energy. And I was pushing the administration and Congress to come up with a rapid depreciation schedule for the capital improvement costs in those coal-fired plants. And Paul Ryan, remember, at that time, was chair of Ways and Means and absolutely refused to address it. So it's the Republicans that are keeping this from moving forward.
All right, and then I guess we would go to Billy Kovacs. A question for another candidate.
I'm sorry, I keep stealing your microphone.
No And if you want to sing your question.
Sing, Billy, sing.
For you, Jim, anytime. We'll sing. Just meet me at Congress at karaoke night. We'll be there. I'll sing Unchained Melody, okay? It's my favorite song. It's a great song. Gosh, my question's for Ann Kirkpatrick as well. You've been at we see what the spotlight of public service does when you look at someone like Hillary Clinton running for elected office for so long and having yourself in that spotlight and being criticized a lot, whether for or against. What keeps you coming and advocating for what you believe in? What drives you to keep being a public advocate?
You know, I believe, Billy, that our democracy is being threatened. And, you know, I am a grandmother, and I cherish the time with my grandchildren. But what kind of future are they going to have if we don't stand up and fight back? And that's what motivates me, that's what drives me. And let's finding that common ground, and I have a long track record of being able to do that, and really to meet my colleagues regardless of party and find out what they care about. And I will tell you, we've been able to do some really good things for veterans because of that, but it really is about protecting our democracy and ending Citizens United. I'm so concerned about the money and the special interests that are running our country. I mean, quite honestly, people ask me all the time, why isn't government working? It's because we've got to take dark money, the secret money, out of politics. We added up how much money has been spent against me in the past 10 years, $40 million, and a lot of it was secret money. That's what dark money is. And that is threatening the democracy of our country, and we've got to do something about it. We've got to take back the House, we've got to get rid of Martha McSally, and we've got to pass repeal of Citizens United.
And it's your turn to ask one of the other candidates a query.
My question is for Billy. So Billy, it appears to me that you're the youngest candidate up here. And my question is, you know, what are your ideas for the Democratic Party to turn out the millennials? They're such a critical part of this next election, and I just want to hear your ideas about that.
I'm not that young. 30.
I don't think I'd sell you any alcohol, that's for sure.
That's right, I owned a restaurant. I wouldn't let you in either, Jim. Thanks. You know, I think the biggest thing that we saw, and again, the 2016 election, was that we feel, you know, as millennials, I think we're the generation of vision, of feeling something, of bringing back this idea of what government can be, and it should be by the people. I think that we have to stand for something as a party. I think that any type of Democrat shouldn't just, because there's a D next to someone's name, vote for that person. When you look at Democrats, and especially millennials, we want someone that stands for something, and we want a vision for the future. And I think that as I go on campus, or as I go in Green Valley, or Cochise County, or Sun Sites, or Douglas, that resonates because it's true and it's authentic. And we haven't seen authenticity for a long time, and people are waiting for it to come back. So I think that's going to get millennials.
And now I think, Matt, you're the last one here, right? Last opportunity. That's right. Yes, right.
I'm not used to being alphabetically, like,
Backwards.
yeah.
It's challenging.
H is not usually the first. Okay, this is for Ann. I was just curious, during the Senate campaign, I remember seeing some ads that you ran advocating for House members to have term limits of 3, so total of 6. And since this would be your 4th term if elected, I was just curious what is your thought process behind that? What motivated you to change your mind on that?
I have a haven't changed my mind. So I signed on to a pledge for a constitutional amendment for term limits, and I still support that constitutional amendment. And I encourage my colleagues in Congress to do the same. We don't have enough yet to do a constitutional amendment, but I still support the idea.
All right. I think we have, about 20 minutes left. I'm going to do one more question to everybody, and then we'll get to closing statements. What's that? All right. One more, is that all right? Judge's decision? All right. Last question, we'll throw this out to everybody. What the heck? What do you plan to do to motivate voters to turn out in a midterm election? And we'll start right here with you, Bruce.
We have to level with them and be authentic and not be strident partisans and not feed into the divisiveness in this country. The divisiveness in this country and the deep partisan divide is tearing our fabric apart, unlike anything we've seen perhaps since the Civil War. And so my message is one in which I will tell you what I believe. I will take a risk and tell you that I believe in Medicare for all. A risk which is, by the way, unfolding the way gay marriage did. 10 years ago, none of us would have said we support the right of any person to marry the person that they love. Today, no one questions it. There was a 3-year period in there in which the nation just said, enough. I know someone who's gay and I love that person. That person is a friend, that person is a member of my family, and that authenticity and that forwardness and that being bold, truly bold, to live up to our highest values where we can say something like, yes, you can indeed marry whoever you want. Not like the tragic, pathetic spectacle that we saw from the Trump administration and Republican conservatives unfold in the last 2 weeks with Jane Doe, the 17-year-old immigrant from Central America who wanted an abortion, and the courts and the ideologues and the politicians and Trump said, no, you can't. Well, thank God she finally had the right to her abortion either yesterday or today. So to beat the partisan divide, let's tell you who we are, what we believe in. Let's be bold, because these times, these consequential times, require precisely that from each one of us and anyone running for office across the country, to unite us and to wrap ourselves around those values which made this nation truly great, and we will reclaim them very, very soon.
You know, we hear so many times that this election is the most important one. This one really is the most important one. I want you to get to know me. I want to be open. I want to be accessible. I want to knock on doors, meet you where you are. This is our second forum, and the attendance tonight is just fabulous. But I have to tell you, it really works the other way around. You motivate me. I love listening to what your stories are when you tell me what motivates you to be involved right now and to go vote next year. You motivate me. And it's the issues that we care so deeply about. And I really appreciated the woman over here I was visiting with, and she was said, you know, our democracy's at stake. That's what motivates me. Then other people over here say protecting the environment. That's what I care about. Other people say healthcare. Healthcare, I want to make sure that my family and my friends have healthcare. And so you motivate me by interacting with me, because that's what I care about and want to be of service to you. We will be doing more of these forums. I will be knocking on doors. I'm making appearances to many of the indivisible groups in town. And these are great groups. I mean, I spoke to a group the other night, and probably 40 to 50 people there. 2/3 of them had never been involved in campaigns before, but they were intelligent, knowledgeable about the issues, and motivated.
All right. Matt, how do you get the voters out?
Yeah, I think I would like to say that those kinds of activities, that us getting out there is going to be the largest motivating factor, but that's going to be part of it, being present, showing up. you won't see Martha McSally doing anything like this unless you pay her, right? And she won't answer any questions, my gosh, no. But I really think, and I see this from my patients in the hospital, they put aside their own medical conditions. They're coming in with heart attack or chest pain or stroke or vomiting problem. I won't get into it anyway. So, but various issues, and they'll recognize me from the campaign last time, from the TV ads, and they'll put all of that aside and say, you need to get involved. And they want to talk about Trump's tweets, or they want to talk about Martha McSally voting against Planned Parenthood. And so the occupant of the White House, combined with the inaction or horrible action of the Congress, is not being lost on the voters, including millennials. And so I think that in combination with an active group of folks up here like us, and a tremendously active group of folks like you all, it is, what, Thursday, 6:30, a year away from an election, and there's like 400 people here. I'm seeing that motivation happening, and it is inspiring to me. I know it's inspiring to all of us up here. So I think just working and getting out in the community and continuing to just harness that energy, and I think we're going to have a really great turnout next year.
Hey, Mary, getting the voters to turn out. What's the strategy?
I am going to be very authentic with you. I am going to hear you out, listen to you, and then respond to what you want and what you care for. I'm a little disturbed because throughout this forum, nobody's really talked about poverty. And poverty is the biggest problem in this country. There are 45 million people who are poor in this country. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. And I think by hearing you in terms of what you think is important, I think that you think that it is important to address issues as job insecurity, retirement insecurity, some people not knowing where their next meal is coming from, and responding to that and knowing how that feels, and passionately caring for fighting for people for an opportunity to thrive in this country, to have opportunities, to get good jobs, to look for good jobs, to get good education, to get skilled training. But I think we want the American dream to come back. And I think that you're going to see my passion to make sure that everybody in CD2, everybody in this state, and people in this country thrive. And that we will not put up with poverty anymore, and that we will work hard to fight it. Thank you.
Billy, you touched on this earlier, but as you have with all questions, you've been one step ahead. Your thoughts on motivating voters in the general election?
Question, how many people are primary voters in this room? Just raise your hand. That's what we need to focus on. We need to focus on the fact that we are all the engaged constituencies that we keep talking about in our small areas, and get this message out to our own parts of the community. We need to start engaging new voters in this district. I think I did it 6 months ago. We've knocked 3,000 doors, gone to 250 businesses in the first 3 months, and then hit another 250. We need to start talking to the people that it's poverty, but it's wealth inequality. When you go into the district in any form of capacity, people want to talk about what happened to their job over the last 60 years and where it is now. We need to resonate with voters, and not coming from a place of knowing more, and not being a collaborator, or not going into, let's say, advocating for DACA and saying that I stand in solidarity, but standing as a collaborator and being on the front lines with that person, because I don't think that people need more people saying, I stand with you, but we need to walk into those hot nests and sit and be on the picket lines with them, and fight that fight from the forefront. That's what a vision looks like. People want that. And as we look at this race, and it's a federal representative, We need to be the representative by the people, for the people, and of the community that we serve. And I want to do that. So.
All right, and we're down to closing statements. I think we came down that way on opening statements, so let's come back this way on closing statements. Billy, this is, what do we have there, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, closing statement.
I think we have a lot of time to get to know us. It is about 11 months before the election, but I really want every single one of you to focus on the things that we just talked about. It's getting people out to vote. None of us are going to win this race if we don't come together as Democrats and understand that our collective voice is stronger than theirs, and if we work together from the beginning to push our progressive voice, that we will win this race, but if we divide, we will fall. And the other one is the fact that we need to focus on turnout. You can hear about me over the next 11 months, but if we don't focus on voter turnout, we will not win this election. And we all need to be real about that, and we all need to focus on it.
I think voter turnout is very important. I also think that this district has done a lot of good work already starting now in terms of getting that vote out. We've got the ground game, who's working really hard. We've got PCs who are working really hard. We're identifying folks, knocking on doors, telling them what the issues are, talking to them about why it's important to register to vote, asking them to try and vote early. So I think that we're doing a lot of work already to get that vote out. I personally am working constantly to talk to people in terms of what they want their representative to do for them. I go to as many gatherings as possible so they know who I am. Not only the fact that I am from here, that I am a local. I came to school here, elementary school, high school, college. My first job was here. But I also have a lot of experience in federal government. But these are the things that I want people to feel very confident that when I go to Congress, that I can represent them and that I know what I'm doing. I know the processes. I know exactly how budgets are created. I've been responsible for creating $240 billion budgets. I've been responsible for funding 1 million soldiers and taking care of their families. There's a lot of complexity in those processes, and there's a lot of leadership that's required in that kind of job. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, entrusted me to take care of the United States Army in terms of funding them in the manner that they needed in order to fight and survive in the battlefield and to make sure that they were well taken care of here at home. But again, I think that the ground game that we are now putting in place between all of us, and all of you have some stake in the game in terms of being PCs, are preparing for making sure that this election will have the biggest turnout ever.
Matt Hahn, 2 minutes, closing statement.
So somehow I got through this without talking about healthcare, which is amazing. But there will be more of these forums, and of course we can talk more then. But look, I think we need to have from Southern Arizona the person who can build the most trusted relationship, who can really be connected with the people. And since the last campaign, which was not fun, losing's never fun. I spent 6 months working a lot in the hospital, at Tucson Medical Center, hearing from a lot of the patients, like I mentioned before, about their concern and how activated they were becoming. And that, again, tremendously inspiring, but that is something that helps me to understand what exactly the community is facing. And at Tucson Medical Center, we get patients from Benson and Bisbee and Douglas and all over the Cochise County, right? So this is not just right here in Tucson. So I'm able to very uniquely interact with folks. And it's not just about heart attacks and strokes. It's also about my kid just lost his job, he's sleeping on my sofa. There's a lot of other things you find out about when you're treating someone in the hospital. You're meeting someone in a very, very difficult circumstance. You have to create and form a trusting relationship, and you have to help them through whatever is going on. And that is something that has been a privilege for me, and something that I will continue to do when elected several times a month, so that I can maintain that connection and that trusted, close relationship with the community. So you all know that I'm there in DC fighting for you. You know my values because they're your values, and that's exactly how I believe that I'm probably going to be the best person to get rid of Martha McSally. So thank you all for being here.
All right, and for Patrick, final statement.
Well, you know, we're united. Everyone in this room wants to replace Martha McSally, right? Yeah. I've actually lived in Tucson longer than Martha McSally has. So I'm an Arizona Wildcat. I got my undergrad degree here, and then taught school for a couple of years, and I taught at Spring Junior High, and I see Connie McDonald here tonight, and she also taught at Spring Junior High. And then I went to law school, and I was a law clerk in the Pima County Attorneys, and I see our county attorney here tonight, Barbara Lawal. I was actually a law clerk for Barbara Lawal, and then worked in the county attorney's office. And so I got married here, had my first child, my daughter Whitney here, and I have two children. My stepson works for Raytheon, Whitney's here, and two grandchildren. And Martha McSally can't see that. But I want to thank all the candidates here tonight for being here. We'd love to have Martha McSally up here answering your questions, right? Marion, thank you for putting this together. Thank you for McSally Take a Stand. Thank you, all of you, for coming. But you know, McSally has taken a stand. And I just want to point out a few things to you. She took a stand to kick 24 million people off of their health care. 40,000 people in Congressional District 2. She took a stand, she's very proud of, that she has voted 96% of the time with Trump. She took a stand when she voted for the funding for the border wall, and then she took a stand when she voted for the unspecified budget that just came out. So you know what happens now is that Republicans in the Appropriation Committee will debate how they're going to spend that money. And I just want to tell you a couple of alarming things. They will cut $473 billion from Medicare and $1 trillion from Medicaid. That's what we're fighting about. Thank you.
All right. Bruce, we'll wrap it up with you. 2 minutes.
Who does Martha McSally listen to? Who benefits and who is hurt? She listens to her donors, including pharma, fossil fuel, banking, and financial interests, and to partisan acolytes like Paul Ryan. Her supporting role is to protect the extreme private wealth of the top 1% at our expense. She listened to her benefactors today and voted for a destructive tax bill that will strip $1.5 trillion from Medicare, guts Medicaid, adds over $1.5 trillion to the deficit. The bill even opens, as I mentioned earlier, exploitation of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to fossil fuel extraction and pipelines. We pay the price with less and more costly health care coverage, higher gas prices, and increased global warming. She supports yesterday's Senate bill that rewards the banks she pleaded to for money this spring by making it impossible for class action lawsuits against those financial interests that break the law. Families, small businesses, and creditors are hurt. Students are forced to pay exorbitant interest payments on their student loans, saddling them with debt so heavy they will struggle for years, negatively impacting the economy. The drastic cuts to Medicare will significantly cut benefits for those relying on its efficient health care coverage and into which they pay their entire working lives. She takes money from pharmaceuticals that have been fined tens of millions of dollars for illegal practices. Some are producers and pushers of highly addictive opioids, the very prescription drugs that kill more people than heroin. There were 790 opioid-attributed deaths in Arizona in 2016. Over 2 every day. 1 every other day in southern Arizona. But farmers' lobbyists had already gotten to McSally for her vote, racking up billions in profits. There has seldom been a more consequential time in the fight to protect families across our district and nation. Bought and sold politicians are allowing the U.S. to become chaotic and divided at home and unstable around the globe. As Martin Luther King said in his I Have a Dream speech, this is the fierce urgency of now.
And it is exactly 8 o'clock. We are right on time. Let's give a big round of applause for all the candidates. I also want to encourage everyone to pick up the Tucson Weekly Best of Tucson edition in the streets today. And a final word.